Claire and Jeremy looked like the perfect couple, smiling in wedding photos, glowing with happiness, and called goals by friends. But just 3 weeks after saying, "I do," Jeremy's dark secret shattered everything. He tricked Claire, killed her, and sold her kidneys and other vital organs in a chilling web of greed and betrayal. What happened behind closed doors would shock a community and expose a horrifying crime that few could have imagined. Claire Morgan had always believed in love. A soft-spoken neonatal nurse from Portland, Oregon, she lived a quiet life filled with purpose. Her world revolved around long hospital shifts, coffee dates with her sister, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. She had been single for a few years, waiting for someone who felt right. That person seemed to arrive one rainy November evening when she matched with Jeremy Cole on a dating app. His profile was simple. No flashy photos, just a few pictures of him hiking and smiling with his dog. He described himself as a freelance tech consultant who valued honesty, travel, and good conversation. The ire connection was fast. Jeremy was attentive and thoughtful. He remembered little details, sent flowers for no reason, and listened when Claire vented about her day. He always seemed available, yet never clingy. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Claire's friends noticed how happy she was. Her mother said it was the first time she'd seen Claire truly relaxed in years. Jeremy was charming without being arrogant, mysterious without seeming suspicious. He seemed perfect. By the time spring arrived, they were already talking about marriage. Jeremy said he didn't believe in wasting time. He told Claire that when you know, you just know. She agreed. They moved in together that April and were married 6 months later in a quiet ceremony in her parents' backyard. The wedding was intimate, close friends, a handful of family members, and a soft breeze that carried laughter through the trees. Claire wore a vintage lace dress she found in a second-hand shop. Jeremy wore a tailored navy suit. The photos captured the sunlight falling gently on their faces as they smiled and held hands. Online, the images spread quickly. Friends and acquaintances left comments like, "Power couple, you two are goals and meant to be." But no one knew that the man standing next to Claire had created an entirely false version of himself. He had no family coming to the wedding, because none existed in the way he described. There was no tech consulting business, no co-workers, and no digital footprint linking him to any of his supposed projects. Claire didn't question it. She believed the story, because she wanted to believe the man. She had opened her heart, her home, and her future to someone who saw her not as a partner, but as an opportunity. For Jeremy, love was never the point. The smiles were for show. The vows were part of a plan. Behind the perfect wedding day was a countdown, one only he knew had started. And it would end just 3 weeks later. After the wedding, Claire and Jeremy settled into what seemed like a blissful routine. Their new home, a modest 2-bedroom house in the suburbs, was filled with candles, wedding gifts, and the gentle hum of domestic life. Claire returned to her job at the hospital, while Jeremy claimed to be working from home, consulting on software projects with overseas clients. He often kept odd hours, blaming time zone differences, and spent long periods locked in his office. Claire, trusting and still glowing from the excitement of being a newlywed, didn't pry, but behind the closed door of Jeremy's office, a darker world was unfolding. His laptop wasn't used for client calls or spreadsheets. It was a portal to the dark web, a hidden layer of the internet where anonymity shields crime. Jeremy had been active on these platforms long before meeting Claire. He used encrypted browsers and fake identities to access organ trafficking forums, where users posted requests and offers like classifieds. It was here that Jeremy had learned the prices of human organs, the logistics of harvesting, and the methods of smuggling them across borders. Months before their wedding, Jeremy had begun preparing. He downloaded medical manuals, purchased surgical tools, and watched disturbing videos posted by others in the trade. He wasn't a doctor, but he was careful and methodical. His real job, if it could be called that, was coordinating the illegal sale and transport of human organs. For him, Claire wasn't a wife. She was a high-value asset. Her health, her blood type, even her clean medical history from her nursing job made her ideal. He had targeted her from the start. Jeremy's background was a fabrication. The dog in his dating profile belonged to someone else. His name had been changed several times. No one from his past had attended the wedding because he had no past that could stand up to scrutiny. Every detail was calculated. He'd chosen Portland carefully, close enough to rural areas where activity could go unnoticed, but far enough from his previous identities to avoid detection. As the weeks passed, Jeremy began isolating Claire more subtly. He encouraged her to distance herself from some of her friends, claiming they didn't respect their marriage. He insisted on managing their finances and suggested she stop posting online. He said it was about privacy. In truth, he was laying the groundwork for her disappearance. To Claire, these small changes felt like the compromises of married life. But to Jeremy, they were steps in a larger, darker plan that was almost ready to unfold. It was a Sunday morning when everything changed. Claire was scheduled for an early shift at the hospital but never showed up. Her supervisor called, thinking she might be running late, but there was no response. Claire's phone went straight to voicemail. By afternoon, multiple messages from family and friends had gone unanswered. Her sister, who spoke to Claire almost daily, immediately sensed something was wrong. Claire was reliable, organized, and never missed work without warning. Her absence wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. Jeremy, when contacted by Claire's co-workers, claimed she had left the house the night before after a disagreement. He said she needed some space and had mentioned visiting a friend for a few days. He didn't seem concerned. He didn't call her phone or ask around. To everyone else, his calm attitude felt strange, but he dismissed their worries as overreactions. Claire's sister, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly off, reported her missing that evening. When officers arrived to question Jeremy, he repeated the same story. Claire had packed a small bag, left in her car, and hadn't returned. But when police checked the garage, they found her car still parked inside. Her purse was hanging on the back of a kitchen chair, and her phone charger was plugged in by the nightstand. Nothing in the house suggested she had left for a trip. Her clothes were untouched. Her toothbrush was still wet. Her passport and ID were found in a drawer. As detectives dug deeper, more inconsistencies emerged. Jeremy couldn't provide the name or number of the friend Claire supposedly went to see. He hadn't reported her missing. He hadn't called her family. His browser history had been cleared and his phone showed no outgoing calls or texts to Claire after she supposedly left. Surveillance cameras from the neighborhood offered no footage of Claire leaving the house at all. But there was one camera, 2 blocks away, that captured Jeremy leaving the house just after midnight. He was driving a rented white van. When police asked about it, he claimed he'd been picking up supplies for a surprise. It was enough to raise red flags. A missing woman, no signs of her leaving, and a husband whose story didn't match the facts. Detectives quietly launched a full investigation. They began pulling Jeremy's financial records, digital activity, and rental agreements. It didn't take long before a disturbing pattern began to emerge, one that pointed not to a runaway, but to something far more sinister. Claire hadn't disappeared, she had been taken. The search for Claire intensified as more questions surrounded her disappearance. Police expanded their investigation beyond the home, looking into Jeremy's recent movements and any potential locations he had visited. One lead came from a receipt found in a drawer in Jeremy's desk. Payment for a storage unit rented just 2 weeks earlier under his name. It was located 30 miles outside Portland, in a quiet, sparsely populated industrial area. Detectives obtained a warrant and visited the unit. From the outside, it looked like any other storage space, nothing unusual. But when the roll-up door creaked open, what they found inside sent chills down their spines. The small windowless unit had been transformed into something far more sinister. Along one wall sat a foldable medical table. Next to it were several unopened boxes labeled with medical supply brands. Scattered around were latex gloves, syringes, IV bags, surgical scissors, and rolls of plastic sheeting. A portable generator and high-powered lights hung from the ceiling, wired in hastily. There was no electricity in the unit, meaning Jeremy had planned for independent lighting. Most disturbing of all was a large tarp spread across the floor, stained a dull reddish-brown. Crime scene technicians collected samples and quickly confirmed what investigators feared. It was blood, and it matched Claire's DNA. In a nearby biohazard disposal container, they found tubing, soiled gauze, and several empty vials labeled with blood types. On a metal tray, someone had left behind a pair of surgical forceps and a scalpel. This wasn't a place used for storage. It was a setup. Crude but deliberate, created for a specific and disturbing purpose. Jeremy had gone to great lengths to prepare it. Rental records showed he had made several trips to the unit in the days leading up to Claire's disappearance. One of the facility's security cameras, though partially obstructed, captured Jeremy arriving late at night in a white rental van and unloading large, heavy boxes. That van, police confirmed, matched the vehicle spotted on the street camera near his home the night Claire vanished. The storage unit told a story that Jeremy wouldn't. It suggested planning, precision, and a medical knowledge that raised questions about where he had learned these procedures. Detectives began consulting with forensic surgeons and organ trafficking investigators. The setup, though amateur, was functional. And the presence of blood confirmed that something violent and possibly fatal had occurred inside. What they didn't yet have was a body, but the evidence was piling up, and it pointed to one horrifying possibility. Claire hadn't just been murdered, she'd been harvested. As investigators continued piecing together the disturbing puzzle, they turned their attention to Jeremy's financial records. It didn't take long to uncover a hidden world beneath the surface of his quiet suburban life. Buried beneath layers of false names and untraceable email addresses, Jeremy had set up multiple online identities, cryptocurrency wallets, and accounts on encrypted messaging platforms. These weren't used for work or casual browsing. They were connected to dark web marketplace, places where human lives were reduced to price tags. One discovery stood out above the rest. A life insurance policy taken out in Claire's name just weeks before the wedding. The policy was valued at $750,000, 0 cents. Claire's signature was forged. Jeremy had submitted all the paperwork himself, listing himself as the sole beneficiary. That alone raised serious suspicions, but it was only the beginning. Digging deeper, authorities found a string of cryptocurrency transactions tied to one of Jeremy's anonymous wallets. Over $200,000, 0 cents, had been deposited in the 2 weeks following Claire's disappearance. These payments came from sources across multiple countries, some linked to flagged accounts previously investigated for illegal organ trafficking. The transaction notes were brief and chilling. Coded phrases like confirmed AB delivery, kidneys prepped, and clean corneas. Investigators realized they weren't looking at random payments. Jeremy had sold Claire's body, piece by piece. Recovered chat logs from an encrypted platform showed conversations between Jeremy and buyers who were seeking specific organs. Claire's clean health history and rare blood type made her highly valuable. Jeremy had submitted her medical records, stolen from her hospital login, to prove she was a viable donor. The timing of these conversations lined up almost exactly with the days before and after she vanished. Each message revealed more of his plan. He negotiated prices, discussed extraction procedures, and even arranged for transport. He assured buyers the materials would be fresh and uncontaminated. One buyer transferred nearly $80,000, 0 cents, in Bitcoin the day before police believe Claire was killed. The most horrifying part wasn't just the money, it was the clear, calculated nature of it all. Jeremy hadn't killed out of rage, jealousy, or impulse. He had entered Claire's life with a financial plan. Her trust had been his investment. Her body had been his profit. To the people who loved Claire, she had been a bright, kind soul. But to Jeremy, she had been a business transaction. The illusion of a loving marriage had masked a crime of stunning cruelty. The investigation had now shifted focus from searching for a missing woman to tracking a full-scale black market operation with Jeremy at its center.
After uncovering the chilling evidence linking Jeremy to the illegal organ trade, investigators focused on tracing the buyers and the route Claire's stolen organs might have taken. The transactions pointed to multiple countries, many known as hotspots for black market organ trafficking. Some of the funds came from Eastern Europe, others from Southeast Asia and South America. These locations were notorious for their underground medical networks, where organs could fetch exorbitant prices to desperate recipients. Jeremy's cryptocurrency transactions were complex, routed through numerous wallets and mixers to conceal their origin. However, forensic analysts managed to trace several payments back to individuals who had previously been flagged by international law enforcement agencies for involvement in human trafficking rings. This discovery raised alarms about the scale of the operation Jeremy was part of, more than a one-man crime. He was a small link in a much larger global network. Among the transactions, one stood out, a payment of nearly $80,000, 0 cents marked with the code AB delivery. Claire's blood type was AB negative, a rare and highly sought-after blood group that increases the value of organs like kidneys and corneas. Police believed that Jeremy had sold her kidneys to an overseas buyer who was waiting for a perfect match. Organ trafficking often depends on blood type compatibility, which is why buyers scrutinize medical records carefully before committing funds. Further investigation into customs and shipping records revealed suspicious packages sent around the same time. Some were declared as medical supplies, but were actually equipped with temperature-controlled containers designed for organ preservation. Authorities speculated these packages could have contained Claire's organs, sent to buyers eager to perform illegal transplant surgeries. Investigators also found cryptid chat logs where Jeremy communicated with buyers. The messages discussed timing, transport logistics, and payment confirmations. Jeremy promised that the organs were fresh and ready for transplant, indicating that the extraction and shipping had been executed with grim efficiency. His cold professionalism highlighted the brutal reality of the organ black market, where human bodies become commodities, but the blood, tissue, despite the growing evidence, authorities faced a critical question. What had happened to Claire's body after the organs were removed? Jeremy refused to cooperate or reveal any details, deepening the mystery. Without a body, the case lacked a crucial piece of evidence. Samples and financial trails painted a damning portrait. None of these crimes had been directly linked to violent offenses, which made his sudden escalation to murder and organ trafficking all the more chilling. It seemed that over time, his crimes had grown bolder, fueled by greed and a cold detachment from human life. One of the most shocking revelations was Jeremy's ability to blend seamlessly into new communities. He was a master manipulator, skilled at gaining trust quickly. Witnesses in other cities recalled a man fitting Jeremy's description who had briefly dated local women, always presenting himself as a successful entrepreneur or consultant. His charm masked the calculating mind underneath, a man who saw people as tools rather than individuals. In Portland, neighbors described Jeremy as polite but private. He never socialized much, rarely invited anyone to their home, and was quick to deflect questions about his work. This behavior was consistent with a man who wanted to keep his activities hidden, yet no one suspected the horrific crime unfolding behind closed doors. Authorities also found evidence Jeremy had been researching medical procedures for years. His internet searches included detailed surgical techniques, organ preservation methods, and even information about anti-rejection drugs. This level of preparation indicated he wasn't acting impulsively. He had planned Claire's murder and organ harvesting meticulously. Surveillance footage from past residences showed Jeremy making frequent visits to medical supply stores, often purchasing items that were unusual for an average person. Items like surgical scalpels, sutures, and sterilization equipment. He had assembled a mobile operating setup, allowing him to perform his gruesome crimes wherever he moved. What stood out most was how Jeremy had exploited Claire's trust. She had believed she was marrying a man who loved her. Instead, he had been orchestrating her murder from the very beginning. The betrayal was complete and devastating. Friends and family struggled to comprehend how someone so seemingly normal could harbor such darkness. With his true identity unraveling, law enforcement realized Jeremy had likely committed similar crimes before. The search for other potential victims began, expanding the case from a single horrific murder to a possible pattern of deadly exploitation. Jeremy was not just a murderer. He was a predator, hiding behind a carefully constructed facade. As investigators pieced together Jeremy's web of deceit, they uncovered a network far larger than they had initially imagined. His connection to illegal organ trafficking was just one part of a complex and deeply disturbing underground operation. Law enforcement agencies around the world began collaborating, sharing intelligence, and pooling resources to follow the trail Jeremy had left across borders and continents. One of the key breakthroughs came when authorities identified several buyers linked to organized crime groups known for exploiting vulnerable populations for organs. These syndicates operated sophisticated networks, recruiting or kidnapping victims and using corrupt officials to smuggle harvested organs through customs. Jeremy's role appeared to be that of a middleman, someone who could supply healthy donors without raising suspicion, thanks to his careful selection and manipulation of victims like Claire. Investigators discovered that Jeremy had been monitoring online health forums and social media to identify potential targets. He focused on individuals with rare blood types, good physical health, and no known family nearby. People who would be less likely to be reported missing quickly. The selection process showed a chilling level of premeditation. The scale of the operation shocked everyone involved. From the small storage unit in Portland to shadowy labs overseas, organs were harvested, packaged, and shipped like commercial goods. Buyers paid thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, for kidneys, livers, corn. Jeremy's earnings were a fraction of the total profits, but they were enough to fund his lavish lifestyle and fund continual illegal activities. As more details emerged, it became clear that Jeremy was only a small but essential link in a global supply chain that thrived on human misery. Despite the violence and cruelty, the operation was disturbingly efficient, adapting constantly to evade law enforcement. Some victims were never identified, disappearing without a trace, their fates known only to those running the trafficking rings. This discovery sparked international outrage and renewed efforts to combat organ trafficking worldwide. Governments began pushing for stronger laws, better monitoring of medical exports, and harsher penalties for traffickers. Claire's case became a symbol of the innocent lives destroyed by this hidden crime. Back in Portland, the community mourned the loss of a young woman who had been loved by many. Vigils were held and fundraisers organized to support organ donation awareness and victim assistance programs. While justice for Claire felt incomplete without her remains, the investigation had at least exposed a dark underworld that few knew existed. Jeremy's arrest sent a powerful message, but it was only the beginning of a long fight to dismantle the sinister networks profiting from the exploitation of the vulnerable. The case revealed just how far some would go to cash in on someone who loved unconditionally, and the high price paid by those caught in the crossfire. With Jeremy in custody, the trial became a media sensation, shining a harsh spotlight on the grim realities of illegal organ trafficking and the depths of his betrayal. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence, financial records, encrypted messages, surveillance footage, and forensic tests that linked Jeremy directly to Claire's murder and the organ harvesting operation. The courtroom was tense as the full scope of his crimes unfolded. Cold, calculated, and horrifying. Expert witnesses described the black market organ trade as one of the most lucrative and ruthless forms of trafficking. They explained how networks like the one Jeremy was involved in preyed on vulnerable people worldwide, turning them into unwilling donors or victims. The chilling details of the surgical setups, the transportation, logistics, and the global demand for organs painted a picture that few in the courtroom could forget. For the prosecution, the challenge was to prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Jeremy's defense team attempted to cast doubt on the evidence, suggesting Claire had voluntarily left or had another unknown reason for her disappearance. But the physical evidence, blood in the storage unit, the basement surgical scene, the financial transactions, was overwhelming. Witnesses testified about Jeremy's history of deception and manipulation, reinforcing the portrait of a man who had planned every step. Family and friends of Claire gave emotional statements, describing her as kind, caring, and full of life, someone who trusted deeply and was ultimately betrayed in the worst way imaginable. Their words highlighted the human cost behind the case, reminding everyone that this wasn't just a crime of money, but one of unimaginable personal tragedy. As the trial progressed, more details about the extent of Jeremy's network surfaced. Prosecutors revealed connections to international organ trafficking rings, showing how Claire's murder fit into a larger, ongoing criminal enterprise. The court heard about other suspected victims, some unidentified, whose lives had been stolen for profit. In the end, the jury found Jeremy guilty on multiple counts, including first-degree murder, human trafficking, and illegal organ trade. The judge handed down the maximum sentence, life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some closure, but questions lingered about the many victims still unaccounted for and the vast underground network Jeremy had served. For many, the trial was a grim reminder of how appearances can deceive. Behind Jeremy's carefully crafted image of a devoted husband, a predator willing to destroy the life of the woman he vowed to love, Claire's story became a powerful testament to the need for vigilance, awareness, and stronger measures against the darkest corners of human crime. After the trial, the impact of Claire's story rippled far beyond the courtroom. Her family, devastated but determined, became vocal advocates against human trafficking and illegal organ trade. They worked with nonprofit organizations to raise awareness about the dangers lurking beneath seemingly ordinary lives. Through their efforts, Claire's memory transformed into a beacon of hope for others who might be vulnerable to similar threats. Law enforcement agencies, galvanized by the case, intensified their focus on organ trafficking networks. International cooperation increased, with new task forces created to track suspicious medical shipments, monitor encrypted communications, and identify victims. Governments began implementing stricter regulations on organ donations and transplant surgeries, closing loopholes that criminals had exploited for years. Claire's tragic death sparked legislative changes in several countries, highlighting the urgent need to protect vulnerable individuals from being exploited. The medical community also took note. Hospitals and clinics improved protocols for verifying donors and recipients, introducing better safeguards against forged documents and stolen identities. Medical professionals were trained to recognize signs of trafficking and report suspicious cases, bridging the gap between healthcare and law enforcement. Despite these positive changes, the dark reality remained. Illegal organ trafficking continued to operate in the shadows, adapting to new challenges. Jeremy's arrest and conviction, while significant, were just one battle in a much larger war. Authorities warned that traffickers would continue to exploit loopholes and prey on the desperate unless vigilance was maintained. For Claire's loved ones, healing was a slow and painful journey. The absence of her remains meant they had no physical closure. but their fight to honor her life and prevent similar tragedies gave them purpose. They spoke openly about the dangers of blind trust and the importance of questioning too good to be true relationships, hoping to protect others from falling victim to manipulation. The community that had once admired Claire and Jeremy's perfect wedding photos grappled with the harsh truth behind those smiles. The illusion of a happy marriage had masked a deadly secret, reminding everyone that appearances can be deceiving. Claire's story serves as a haunting reminder of how easily darkness can hide in plain sight and how vital it is to remain alert to the signs of danger. Her life, though cut tragically short, sparked change and hope. And while justice was served in one small way, the battle against human trafficking and organ crime continues, one that demands awareness, compassion, and relentless pursuit of the truth.